So this session is titled The Challenges of Running a Business. It's a 30-odd minute presentation. It's a look at the intermediary models of the future, how customers' behaviour is changing, and building your business to reflect that behaviour. The session's going to be run by Peter Brodnicki from Mortgage Advice Bureau. And by way of an introduction, Peter has been CEO of Mortgage Advice Bureau since 2001 and has overseen the business growth to become one of the UK's largest and most respected networks of mortgage brands. In November 2014, Mortgage Advice Bureau listed on the London Stock Exchange PLC alternative investment market. MAB's network model has attracted some of the UK's leading and most forward-thinking intermediary firms, with estate agency, new build and mortgage shops being examples of the specialist areas of support MAB provides. Peter's strategy during the recession of recent years has been one of growth and diversification, which has involved a number of strategic investments, joint ventures and acquisitions, which have continued in the recovering market we are experiencing today. Peter lives in Surrey but spends half of his time in Derby, where Mortgage Advice Bureau is based, and when he's not working, Peter can be found watching Fulham, which is often not the best way to end the week. So can we please welcome Peter to the stage?
Good afternoon, everybody. Over the next half hour or so, hopefully two things will be achieved. One, it will keep drying out of the rain, and hopefully I'll keep you away from people watching and try and have something a little bit useful for you to take back, hopefully in your businesses. I've been asked to share my personal views of you today on how to run a successful business. My thoughts, as well as my thoughts on how quickly customers are changing and how intermediaries need to change to that, I'm going to talk about how intermediaries really do need to change, not just to thrive, but just to survive as businesses moving forward. We're in a great environment today in terms of market share and what's happened post-MMR. But whilst we've been doing all that and surviving a recession and seeing our market share grow, the customers have been changing rapidly. Business models are changing rapidly. They're changing rapidly in the lender arena. They're changing rapidly in the broker arena. But some are changing faster than others. So I'm going to touch on a little bit about today. Everybody's got their own opinions and experiences, and you'll have yours. So these are mine. You might agree with some of them, you might not, but I'm just here to share them with you. As mentioned earlier, I've been CEO of MAB since 2001. MAB is a mortgage and protection network, as well as being a UK leading intermediary brand, which our AR partners have an option to use. It's another part of our proposition. MAB took a very different approach as a network from day one when we first started the business, and we've continued to do so. We've never ever deviated from our business model or ever compromised our principles. And in November 2014, we listed on AIM and were the first intermediary to do that. So I suppose MAB are seen as a success story. So I'm asked to speak and sing for my supper every so often. But I can assure you that we've learned many, many lessons along the way, and we're continuing to learn those lessons. And we're learning to adapt, and we'll continue to adapt, because that's been the most important part of the business model, and I think will be the most important part for intermediaries moving forward. So I'd like to start off with a couple of questions. What actually defines your individual business? What is your customer experience? Because when I do speak to businesses, I don't really get a very straight answer. It's not necessarily clear by all the advisors in that business what defines that business and what is the defined customer experience of that business. And I'll guess that the vast majority of businesses don't have that clearly. And that's reflected when advisors speak to customers, introduce themselves in the first 10 minutes of any meeting. How much time do they actually spend talking about the company they work for, the company they represent, and why that company will deliver an outstanding service. It's mostly about themselves, and that makes me think that sometimes customers, the businesses themselves, don't have a clear enough proposition to get across to the client. The most successful businesses I have seen in our sector, and I see a lot. Some are with us today, at MAB. Others I've spoken to, I work with, I know well. But the most successful businesses are the ones that absolutely 100% mirror the customer experience. How the customer is making their decisions, how they research, how they want to be communicated with. And it's absolutely crucial that you do that. Because in business, what's normal is we all have our own opinions. We're all marketing experts. We're all mortgage strategists. We all think our way of doing it's the best. But it doesn't matter whether it's you, whether it's me or anybody else, the only person that actually matters is the customer. So unless we're absolutely on top of what that customer is doing, where they're going, what they're thinking, then our business will be doing this and customers will be doing that. And that, I can tell you today, is exactly what's happening in the intermediary market. So what I'm going to do with you over the next few minutes is show you some slides, because what we do at MAB is we do a lot of customer research. Not our own customers, we ask independent companies to do specific research for us, so we are completely up to date with what customers are doing and how they're behaving. And we do this research every 6 months. So I'm just going to share that with you, because how on earth can we build a business unless we understand where customers are heading, what they're doing and how they're making their decisions. So this one talks about forms of communication. And all the slides you're going to see in the next couple of slides will tell you what the national picture is, and also how London compares, because everybody tells me London's very different. People do things differently in London. You'll be surprised how not different London actually is and how similar it is. So what you'll see then is face-to-face. Is face-to-face important? Do customers want face-to-face advice? Well, 43% say they do. But actually a lot of customers are happy to transact, as you'll see from that list, in many different ways, or a combination of ways. So it's not just all telephone. You can't do everything just online, but you can communicate, and part of that sales process can be done through digital. And if you actually look at the people that do say face-to-face, and face-to-face appears not just in the top category, it appears in some element through quite a lot of options that customers have said they would like to see that happen. The thing with the face-to-face is many customers haven't experienced telephone. Their perception is face-to-face, but if they get a really good telephone experience, you'd be surprised how many of those people will switch to the telephone if it's a very, very strong customer experience when they try it. So it's interesting, because we have to consider when we're building our businesses, how do we build them? Is it face-to-face? Is it telephony? How much of it's online? How much of it's digital? Because that's where the lenders are going. And there's a massive difference between the challenger banks today and some really advanced models such as Atom Bank that are launching later this year, early next year, and your mainstream lenders. They're poles apart in terms of technology. No legacy issues, they've listened to customers entirely. So if you were going to start a business today, would you do exactly the same thing as you're actually doing today in the business you already run? It's a lot easier to start a new business than change the model you've currently got. The first thing you'll do is research the customer. You'll see how to build your business, and that's how you'll build your business. Challenger banks are a good example. No legacy issues in terms of technology, culture, branches, so they're free to deliver what the customer wants. And the customer travel of direction is very clear. It's going that way. How quick it goes is another question, but the pace is picking up. This is a slide I pinched off. I pitched off a lender in a presentation a few months ago, and they were talking about giving customers the choice, ensuring they have a really good mobile experience, online experience, branch experience and telephony experience. And the bullet points here are just bullet points that relate to the key features and USPs of some of these things, because you can't really control a customer experience in a branch, just like you can't in an estate agency or through many of the brokers that you've got. It's very, very difficult. You can control a lot more online through mobile and through telephony. So the whole purpose is let the customer decide. So the more options you have in your business, the customer wants choice. If you've only got one way of doing things, you will certainly lose customers over a period of time. You might not see it happening, but it will move, and it'll move very quickly. We also asked customers what they expected a mortgage advisor to discuss with them, what they thought would be realistic for an advisor to talk about. As you see here, you might be surprised, quite a lot of customers actually do expect all these services to be talked about. And yet, obviously, ironically, when I speak to people in London, they will tell me, oh, our customers don't need protection. They're far too informed, they don't need protection. Those two are contradictory messages, by the way. If you're informed, you do need protection. And that's what actually the stats show. You'll see the bottom line, which is London, people are far more aware of those sort of things. So brokers, and I see that happen in London all the time, are convincing themselves customers don't think that, because they've got big prop fees, charging fees very regularly, quite large fees. Protection requires more time being spent with the client. The consequence of not having protection are actually considerably higher than maybe not having the cheapest rate for a few years. But anyway, it dispels a lot of myths. And bearing in mind there are quite a few advisors in the country hitting KPIs higher than this, and that's because they're helping the customer understand what the issues are and what products they need. We also looked at what customers said was really important to them, because it's really important to us. We've got to build our entire business model around this. So a lot of customers said 75% they did like to speak to someone local. They wanted to deal with a local business. A modern responsive website was absolutely crucial. If you look at the intermediary sector, 80–90% aren't, probably 90% plus aren't. And as soon as that customer goes on a mobile device, an iPad, phone, and that experience isn't good, and it's just the main website appearing on there, they switch off. Award-winning, people liked awards. Not everybody can win awards, but awards did give people a lot of confidence. Testimonials, it's the oldest trick in the book. People used to have thank you cards in their offices. Now they get Google updates and ratings, online ratings in terms of your service. Large and national, not everybody can be large and national, but people do take some comfort from that. They also like to see a company quoted regularly. So again, some of the national companies will have that advantage. They want to be on the first page of Google. They want to see more activity on social media. As you'll see, that's more of a London thing than nationally, but the trend is changing and picking up. So ideally, if you could tick every single box and you know that these things are important to customers, obviously as on top of the quality advisor and advice that you give, surely as a business, and as you'd establish what your business offering is, what you're offering to that customer is, that customer experience, you need to tick as many of these boxes as possible. And if you don't, things will change and it will start to affect the business. So this slide is purely just to indicate that the main lenders had 50% of the market. They're very visible. And when people used intermediaries, and when intermediaries had an average market share of 50%, what tended to happen was that people didn't wake up in the morning saying, I'm going to use an intermediary. What they did is they walked into an estate agent, got recommended to one. They walked into a builder, got recommended to an intermediary. They went onto a comparison website and got referred to a mortgage intermediary. Or they got recommended to somebody by somebody, or they came back because they had a previously good experience. But they didn't wake up in the morning saying, how do I find an intermediary? So what's happening now is we're now looking at lenders maybe having direct market share of 25%, which is considerably smaller. They're still visible, but the intermediary isn't. So if today, over the next couple of years, customers don't really realise what MMR is, but they'll slowly understand the impact of MMR. So what they'll understand is when their friends, their family go and see a lender, they'll understand how different it is, and what a long experience it is and how repetitive it is if you actually want to go and speak to more than one lender. So what people will start to do over the next 2 or 3 years is more and more start to actively look for an intermediary. And if that was happening today, and it is starting to happen, they could well find very different intermediaries than the ones they currently deal with. Because their only search and their way of searching will be digital. They will go online, they will check social media, they will look for all those things we just talked about. So though the market share for intermediaries is going up, you could well find through this change process that who actually gets the business could change. And of course, new companies coming in to the market could have a very significant edge and spending money in those areas they know customers are going to respond to. I put this slide up in terms of post-recession technology. So whilst we've all been surviving the recession and now making the most of the increase in market share, etc., the new digitally advanced, more demanding customers are dictating where the buying process starts and finishes. You don't dictate that, they dictate that. And it is changing. So, most businesses I see, we're still doing exactly the same thing, albeit with a lot more, probably more elongated process and more paperwork and more regulation. But ultimately, the sales process in one aspect hasn't changed. So the customer is now starting to change that level of direction. And we need to be visible at every point as they make those decisions. And as I mentioned, at the moment, these are intermediary businesses. This is how we operate. We have our local market share. Very quickly, we can see that business being lost elsewhere if we continue doing things the way we do them. We could be excellent advisors, provide excellent advice, but if the customer's going this way, because that's where customers are now making their decisions, we cannot take for granted that how we receive leads is going to continue the way it is. It's not going to stay that way. Things will change. And as I said, whether that's a challenger bank or whether that is a new mortgage broking model, it's a great market. The intermediary proposition is a very compelling one, but there are different ways of delivering it. And technology allows you to do it far quicker and in a far more scalable way, rather than the way that we've all built our businesses over time. So again, very positive about the intermediary sector and what it's all about, but I have to be aware of one eye on the future, and the future really is here today already. It's just a matter of how quickly it's going to impact on us all. Now, the other thing I think you'll find in a changing market, there'll be new partnership forms, maybe some unlikely partnerships in the future, because we're moving more to a world of specialisation. You could argue a challenger bank is specialist compared to a mainstream model. And people will have to work together potentially rather than trying to be a jack of all trades. So with specialisation, I think come more new partnerships. So I think you'll start to see things change in the intermediary sector, and some maybe unlikely but very positive partnerships take place. But is your business geared to take advantage of that? So my main point, I suppose, from this section of my talk is don't wait to see what happens. You need to be proactive. You need to take control. The direction of travel for the consumer is very, very clear. That research is just a tiny part of other research is available. You can see what's happening. I think you may have heard from other presentations today how technology will change the landscape. It's changing it right now, today. So we have to make sure that we're not firstly protecting our business and then looking at how we can grow it. Is it sustainable? Is the distribution that we have as MAB the sort of distribution customers are going to be dealing with in the future? We have to look at that as a company, and so do the businesses that we work with. And it's our responsibility to help them make that change as well, because it's not easy. What I'd like to do with the next part of the presentation, and this does look, I want to teach you how to suck eggs. But I use this very simple pyramid with some of the business partners we work with. So let me explain why I use it and how I use it. One of the things we do as a network is clearly support businesses. We give them development training, etc. And the problem we have in a vast majority of business, and I'm saying a vast majority, and we're no different and to the intermediary profile in the UK, is that if you're going to run a business and you're going to do this, you've got to do it in this order. Okay? And it might sound very basic, but if I look at a lot of business models out there, is it a defined business model? Is it absolutely clear to consumers and the advisors that work in that business what that business is about? Is it about creating a relationship with the advisor, or is it about creating a relationship with the business itself? Is it about attracting advisors with client banks, or is it about attracting lead sources and then attracting advisors on the back of those lead sources? Is it about specialist markets like estate agency, new build, mortgage shops, lead purchase, online? What is the model? Is it specialist? Do you need specialist advisors? Are they employed? Are they self-employed? Do you need a brand? You know, a lot of businesses think they've got a brand. There are hardly any brands in the UK in the intermediary market. They're all trading styles. So brand takes a lot of investment. But do you need to have a brand to be successful, or is a trading style sufficient? Do you need to work by phone? Do you need face-to-face? Do you need a combination of both? How's that going to operate? Where's the customer moving to? Does face-to-face offer you enough flexibility? Or do you need telephone to give you more flexibility? What are your company USPs in terms of the customer that you're talking to and the broker that you're trying to recruit? Why would they join you? Why would that customer sign up with you? Or why would that broker join you? Why would that broker stay with you? What have you done in your business in terms of protecting your business? In terms of the contracts you've got, whether it's fee waivers on protection, what is your business plan in that respect? Have you built your business on price, or are you charging more and building it on service? In which case, is that service tangible? Can you sell it? Can you attract advisors and customers on the back of it, as well as introducers? What is your customer experience? That is all part of your business model. And if I sat down with a lot of businesses today, there'll be question marks and gaps against some of those questions I've asked. And part of it is always, just because you might have started a business with a business model, the world around you is changing. Constantly, I look at my business model. I've got to make sure if it's still working, is it still current, is it effective? Can I see a trend in any direction? Is it positive, is it negative? So the business model, constantly review your business model. Don't take it for granted. Is it current? Is it moving in the same direction that the consumer is? Okay, the next part going up is the business plan. The business plan, to me, there's always got to be an end game. You get the end game and you work back. That's very difficult when you're in business, depending on how young you are, old you are, how long ago you started your business. What is the end game? And if you haven't got an end game, then you can create an end game just so it will help you take your business in a very specific direction. And what I mean by that is that the way I always say to people is, pretend you're selling your business in 5 years' time. Doesn't matter if you do or you don't, you probably won't. But say you're going to sell it in 5 years' time. Who's going to buy you? Why are they going to buy you? What's good about your business? What's bad about your business? Whenever anybody buys a business, what they do is they agree a price and then they spend the next 3 or 4 weeks ripping it apart, doing some due diligence and smashing that price right back down again. And in many cases, they'll find more than enough holes to justify that process. So we'll start off the tenner for your business, you'll end up, if you're lucky, if you get a fiver. That's how it works. And too many businesses will have too many holes. If you plug those holes, it means your business is going to be far more successful, whether you sell it or it isn't. You're going to make more profit, it's going to be more sustainable. So to work backwards from an end point, I do believe that you do have to create one to have that discipline within your business. You've got to have a look at, is your plan to attract advisors or lead sources? Are you prepared to collect advisors and turnover, or are you going to have very specific minimum standards in your business? It's really important. If you control a lead source, you've got to have a minimum production plan in your business per advisor, and you've got to manage that, because if there is none of that, there will be no standards set within your business. So as soon as you actually control the lead source, you control your distribution. And I'm very aware there's some very successful businesses in the UK that are a collection of very independent advisors that do their own thing. But is that the model moving forward? You have to act differently in businesses like that compared to the ones that you're controlling the lead, and therefore you're controlling the relationship. And therefore you're controlling that the relationship is with the business rather than always being with the advisor. Every income stream you have, has it got a target? Because again, when I speak to businesses, they talk about their overall turnover. And then when we investigate all the different elements of their turnover, we soon find that, yeah, great turnover, and they're fantastic at selling mortgages. And then underneath that, as you'll know, not teaching to suck eggs, maybe not so great on protection, maybe a very varied fee policy, and inconsistency in general insurance and client servicing. And to grow a business successfully, I believe you've got to target each income stream and not target turnover, target each element of the turnover. And if you have a minimum standard for each of those, then the whole business will increase. Too many businesses I see are just turnover related. You can do a lot better if you focus on the individual elements. And I think, again, if you're doing a business plan, the most important thing to do if you want to achieve that business plan is be really honest with yourself right from the outset in terms of what your own strengths and weaknesses are. Are you able to manage all of that? Are you wearing too many hats? What else do you need? Do you need some partner in your business? What skills do they need? Alternatively, do you need a network that can help you or fill some of those skills gaps? Because you're not going to achieve that business plan if you've got too many hats to wear. The next one up, customer experience. Again, I started off saying, what defines your business? What defines your customer experience? Do your advisors actually know what it is? Again, we see a lot of mystery shops. We go and visit a lot of businesses. And many advisors don't spend any time talking about the company, the proposition, what it means to the customer. So again, when you're looking at your customer experience in a business, what do you want your customer to experience? Pre-appointment, during the appointment, in the administration process, the case tracking process, and post-sale. Have you got a defined process? Because if you haven't got a customer experience, I've got to say, you probably haven't got a business, and your advisors won't be clear about what it is. And therefore, how on earth can they get that across to the customer? So what you'll have is a group of individuals, and the experience of the customer will only be as good as the broker is themselves. And if you've got 20 brokers, you'll have 20 versions of what good looks like. And that's really, really important, because I see a lot of businesses where one advisor's doing 5 mortgages, one's doing 20, one's got an 80% life penetration rate, another one's got 50, another one's got 20. This one's charging no fees, this one's charging £500 fees, this one's charging £300 fees. Straight away, what that does tell you is that you haven't got a consistent customer experience in your business, and probably you haven't actually even got one defined. Because if you did have that, you'd manage it to that experience and you'd get a far better outcome. So it's not actually about selling protection or charging fees, it's what is your customer experience and how do we achieve it across all our advisors. It just cannot happen that the variations in one business are that well if you have something defined and you're managing it correctly. It's not possible. And that's a lot of business walking out the door, and it's actually missing a trick in terms of what you can offer your customers as well. Going up to the third one, which is third one down, management. I mentioned earlier, is the business model a collective of advisors that pretty much will do their own thing with a bit of support, or is it controlled distribution? And is controlled distribution the future? And if you're looking at some unlikely partnerships or potentially positive ones moving forward, is controlled distribution going to be attractive to partners moving forward? Are the new models coming our way about controlled distribution? I think they probably are. They're not about collecting good quality advisors with different agendas, timescales, lifestyle jobs for many cases. That might not be the future in terms of where you want to take your business and how you can control it. If you're bringing in a new advisor, then the whole process starts, and I don't know how many people do this, but I know it doesn't happen very often. When you first interview an advisor for your business, do you tell them this is how we do things here? This is our customer experience, this is our expectations, or is it important just to get their turnover and them into the business? Because that's where it starts. That's where it starts and succeeds, or that's where the beginning of the failure starts. Making it clear right from the very, very beginning, this is what we do here. And if you do it, we put our customers first, this is what we're going to give them, this is what it means working for ABC Company. You'll actually earn a lot more money doing it that way too, but it's not an option. This is how we do things. But as I say again, in too many cases, an advisor join a business, whatever good and bad habits they have, when they leave that business in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, they leave with exactly the same good habits and bad habits. Nothing's actually changed. They're just moving company. So there has been no new company experience. I'm not saying this applies to everybody, it doesn't, but I do see it too often there. And again, if you're going to try and manage change within your business, you can't just tell everybody it's going to happen tomorrow. So explain your vision, explain your rationale, give them 6 months, work with them over that 6 months, but just saying at that point, guys, it's changing. And if you haven't actually made that transition, that's how it's going to be. And so I think that everybody's then on the journey with you, and I think that's really, really important, really important part of it. So it's just a bit like, when you're meeting customers as an advisor and you're filling out fact finds, it's about customer outcomes, but it's also about customer experience, and the two are very different. You can have an outstanding customer outcome in terms of doing the right fact finding, asking sufficient questions to justify your recommendation or justify what the customers come to you thinking they want, but the customer experience is on top of that. Okay, and I think that's how the most successful business are managed. So my advice, for all it's worth, is be very, very clear at the outset. When you start your business, or if you've got one currently, when an advisor starts with you, be clear what's expected. You've got to check. I see so many people not checking what advisors do. Yes, there's compliance checks, but if you look at the first 10 minutes of an advisor with a client, that tells you everything. You don't have to even see the rest of the presentation in many cases. The first 10 minutes explains how it's positioned. It's very different. You've got one or two of you in a business, that's not so much the problem. When there's a lot of advisors in a business, you'd be amazed how different that experience can be. But maybe that's because there isn't any clarity. And then you've got to manage the outcomes. You have to manage your business. And then again, I think talking about advisors, are they lead source specific? Are they specialists? Are they estate agents, new build, buy to let? Because there are very different skills required for an advisor if you're going to work in an estate agency, deal with new build. We are moving far more into a world of specialisation than we've ever been before. The trouble with specialisation is it favours the bigger firms, because in a bigger firm focused on specialisation, you do need critical mass to specialise. So if you want specialists in buy-to-let, new build, estate agency, client bank, admin, protection, GI, without a shadow of a doubt, specialisation has proven to show that the performance is considerably better than someone who's a generalist having to do everything. And let's face it, advisors today have to do so much more. So it's not surprising that the penetration rates, the skills are spread too thinly, and we only get really good performance in certain elements of what they do as a whole. Are they a product specialist like protection or GI? We're finding that work very, very well in a lot of businesses. But again, you need scalability. So again, one of the things we try to do is create an outsourced solution so people can do that. I've always said in business, do what you do best and outsource the rest. The most important thing is that the business delivers that customer experience. The advisor's part of that experience, but only the business can control it. A little bit like in the RDR world, where annual fee is charged, and advisors aren't going to go out and see a client every year and sell them something. So the business has to maintain that relationship, demonstrate value to that consumer, keep them informed, give them information, make sure that fee is payable. And although we don't work in a similar way in the mortgage arena, the same principle applies to the most successful businesses we have. So if you've got an advisor who's outstanding at mortgages but rubbish at protection, there's nothing wrong with that. Just deauthorize them if they don't want to do it. It'll be a massive relief. You're just going to need to have someone else to do it. They'll do a better job. They'll be more passionate about protection and GI, They'll explain it far better to the customer. The customer outcome is far more consistent and far better, and everybody does their job they're good at. So I don't believe that we should all try and shoehorn everybody into being experts and everything. It just won't work. You're not going to find enough people that are good enough at every single level. Again, you know most of this stuff. I'm sure I'm teaching you stuff you already know, so apologies if I am. And trainees is an interesting one. The smaller businesses may take an administrator, get them authorised, which is great because they're still generating an income for the business, whilst they're training, so that's not an issue. But actually, if you're serious about having a trainee policy in your business, it's going to cost you a lot more than a fee to an agency. Even if you've paid an expensive fee of £5,000, a trainee will cost you a lot more than that. But if you do it properly, and a lot of businesses do need to have the right structure to bring a trainee through, it's going to be 18 months before you've recouped the original costs and they're starting to create a monthly profit for you. So it is a big commitment. So if it's a major part of your strategy and you do believe that, especially if you're doing sales on the phone, that's more to do with trainees, you've got an environment you can train them in. But we do need to bring more trainees in, but don't take it lightly. It's not the cheapest option. It's the most time consuming. It can be the most rewarding if you've got the structure, but I'd say it's the exception rather than a rule for many businesses. And then I'll go back to development. And as I started at the beginning here, what tends to happen is this happens first, and these sort of things are either ticked or not ticked along the way. The best development takes place when all this is in place. The right advisors, the right management, the right customer experience, the right business plan, the right business model. And then we can upskill people. Very rarely do I ever see anybody going to a training course where they've been briefed by their business owner or their manager why they're going to that course, what you expect of them off that course, never mind being debriefed when they come back from the course. They just go on a course because they've been told they've got to go on one. And typically in all types of training, we have a lot of trainers. We have some fantastic trainers. We get some great feedback on our training. But if this structure is not in place, because we can't do this bit, all you'll find is that. And you find that in pretty much 99% of businesses. I was in a meeting the other day, which was for the British Mortgage Senate, which was for business owners of networks and large mortgage brokers. And I said, I was on a panel there, and I said, I can't imagine how much resource and money is being spent in this room trying to get people to sell protection, all right, with no impact whatsoever. Because if you actually look at impacts on protection trends, they're just not happening. It's more about all these other things. Once you've got those in place, that will work. That's basic stuff, but it's true and it's happening an awful lot. And again, I think training can be a punishment. It's not a punishment. We do it as a team. We have an objective as a business. We're trying to get to a particular point, make it clear to everybody in the business why you're trying to get there, how quickly you want to get there, what their individual role in that is, and then go on that journey together. And I think that clarity is so important in the most successful businesses I see. Okay, so to finish off with, just want to have a couple of slides here to say, just to recap what I said, always have an end. You know what the end game is, even if you have to create an artificial end to get you focused on what you're trying to achieve. Really, really important. This is a slide that some of our trainers use. People will forget what you say, forget how you act, but will never forget how you made them feel. That doesn't just apply to an advisor, it does apply to a business. A business has got to have a customer experience. The business is responsible for putting all the elements in place to make that customer feel right and to want to go for that experience again and to recommend that experience. This sat-nav probably describes a wide spectrum of people in any industry, but including the mortgage intermediary market. There are things changing around you. They're either in the too difficult box, so you're either down Apathy Avenue, Safe Street, Risk Road, or Do Nothing Drive. And that's what people will always justify, whatever one of those they're in. Now, all I can say in my business is that we have taken risks, and I do believe you do have to take risks in business, but calculated ones. And I don't actually believe we're taking a risk because the evidence is all around us about what's happening, and it's just how deep you're burying your head. It is frighteningly fast. That's a massive opportunity for a lot of people. It's a massive threat for others. And the recession, that's not a big issue because you always bounce from a recession, but you don't bounce from the way the market's changing, the consumer's changing. So, to me, you've got to go a little bit down a risky road. But with some people around you, your team around you, and with a clear vision of what you're trying to achieve. This is a controversial one. We had a futurologist at our conference earlier this year, and he gave us lots of examples of why every single social, technical, and business infrastructure we have today cannot possibly survive. All right? So that's quite a statement, but it's absolutely true. You wouldn't believe some of the examples of the pace of change and how some of that is being held back currently. It's happening right now, and out of all the different sectors in our market, the mortgage intermediary sector must be one of those, because it just cannot survive right now, taking this journey with the customer doing that. We have to change. We've got an outstanding proposition, some fantastic people, advice and a service the customer really, really values. We've just got to deliver it in the way the customer wants to receive it. Last couple of slides, we have this up on our wall in our offices. It's not the strongest that survive, nor the most intelligent, thank God for me, but rather those most adaptable to change. That is the key. All right, it's easy to talk about it. I've got a really good friend that predicts the future constantly. He tells me what shares are going to do, what the market's going to do, what the world's going to do, and 9 times out of 10 it happens. But does he change? No. So he's in exactly the same place, but he's very good at predicting it. So there's a lot of information around us, a lot of help to make those decisions, but we've got to be able to do it. When I talk about risks, is this guy really taking a risk? Most of us, including me, probably wouldn't want to do that. But the fact is it really a risk? You know, that rope isn't going to break. Well, not mostly anyway. You know it's going to get you down safely. And that's the whole point I'm trying to make today. This is actually quite exciting what's happening. The opportunity is fantastic. You're not going to fall or hurt yourself. But the longer you take to make that change, the harder it is going to make that change, and it could be too late. All I've shared with you today is some basic business principles. It's what we've lived by. It's what we work with our business partners to try and do. You know, it's exciting. I think change is exciting. And I'm sure you've heard a lot of the messages here today. So that's all I've got to share with you today. Thanks for your time, and enjoy the rest of the expo.